Welcome to the North Star Legacy. My name is Jake, and at 32 years old, I thought I knew everything about value. After all, I was a successful data analyst in Silicon Valley. But the day I flew back to Anchorage for my father's funeral, my world of clean spreadsheets and predictable outcomes was instantly traded for a world of cold Alaskan grit, family betrayal, and a pile of worthless junk. My brothers thought they had cut me out of my inheritance with a cheap joke, but they never accounted for the power of data, or the secret hidden within a lifetime of my father's frustrated complaints. Prepare yourself for a story about finding billions where others only see garbage. Before we begin this journey, take a moment to drop a comment about where you're connecting from, and please hit that like and subscribe button. The inheritance. I had inherited Dad's scrap heap while my older brothers secured his multi-million-dollar mine and openly laughed at my expense. The memorial service for my father had ended exactly 24 hours ago. The air in Anchorage, Alaska was so piercingly cold, it felt as if the very essence of sorrow was crystallizing in my lungs. You know that deep, bone-chilling cold that makes even a simple breath painful? That was the kind. I'd flown up from Palo Alto, California, expecting the usual somber ritual, silence, shared memories, perhaps a few obligatory tears. Honestly, I would have settled for a clumsy, awkward embrace. Instead, I was met with a business intervention. My two older brothers, Garrett and Wesley, were waiting for me not at the church reception, but right outside Dad's old, weathered cabin. They stood on the dusty gravel drive, arms tightly folded, wearing expressions suitable for a hostile takeover, not a family tragedy. Garrett offered a curt, cold nod. No comforting handshake. No sympathetic, "How are you holding up, Jake?" Just that single, dismissive gesture. "The attorney is already inside, Jake. We need to finalize the documents while you're still in the state." While I'm still in the state. As if I were a fleeting outside venture capitalist they had to trap before I returned to real civilization. My instinct screamed at me to retreat, jump back into the rental Chevy Suburban and drive straight to the airport. But grief has a peculiar way of warping judgment. It makes you passive when you should be alert. It makes you yearn only to get through the next 5 minutes, consequences be damned. So, I followed them in. The house was heavy with the scent of memory, stale pipe tobacco, fine metallic dust, and that specific petroleum vapor that perpetually clings to heavy workwear. Dad had lived here alone for the past 7 years. The place felt frozen in time, as though he'd ceased caring about anything but the earth the moment Mom passed. Garrett immediately dismissed any sentimentality. He swept a stack of old trade journals off the kitchen table and unfurled a massive faded survey map. The paper was so fragile at the folds it was almost translucent. He jabbed a thick, calloused finger onto a central section, circling the house, the primary processing mill, and the wash plant. "This is the central claim, the equipment, everything. The main vein where Dad was washing gold for 35 years. It's honest, hard work. It feeds families. Always has." He narrated it like a clip from a historical documentary. Hard work feeds families. Noble, indeed. But I have the brain of a financial data analyst. I can't simply switch it off. While Garrett was delivering his lecture on legacy, my eyes cataloged the scene through the window behind him. The main winch on their extraction rig was completely rusted through. I could see daylight right through the cable housing. And stacked on the porch were water-damaged, unopened yellow envelopes, safety violation notices. They weren't working hard. They were ruthlessly draining the last drops of value from Dad's infrastructure, letting it crumble slowly, like landlords who just collect rent while the foundation collapses. Then Garrett's hand shifted to a different, much larger section of the map. He waved at it with the same casual disdain one might show a heap of rubbish too cumbersome to haul away. "And this," he said, "is Whispering Gulch. You know what it is? The junk lot. Dad spent 3 decades dumping every busted piece of machinery, every load of worthless tailings, every scrap of metal not worth his time into this ravine. It's essentially a landfill with our last name on it." Wesley, my middle brother, jumped in, playing the reasonable mediator, the one who pretends concern while positioning himself for the biggest reward. "Look, Jake," he said, his tone thickly laced with false pity that made my skin crawl. "We know you're not built for this. Pickaxes and dirt under your nails. You have your high-tech job in Silicon Valley, your stock options, a completely different world." Garrett nodded as if they'd meticulously rehearsed the script. "So, here's our proposal," Wesley continued. "We'll take the main claim, all the debt, all the grueling labor, all the responsibility. You take Whispering Gulch. It's a clean asset. No overhead, no maintenance, no headaches." A clean asset? He called a literal garbage dump a clean asset. Garrett slid a folder across the kitchen table toward me. The papers were already tagged with bright yellow sticky tabs everywhere I needed to sign. They had prepared this before my plane even touched down. "You might get a few $1,000s for the scrap metal, maybe more if you're patient. Meanwhile, Wes and I will manage the real work, and you'll receive your share without lifting a finger. Easy money, little brother. Easy money." My analyst's mind, the one that built predictive market models that made my firm millions, was screaming, "Read every line. Something is profoundly wrong. Nobody offers easy money without a motive." But another part of me, the son who had buried his father 24 hours earlier, just wanted out. Out of this house. Away from this calculated contempt disguised as kindness. I would have signed away a kingdom just to end the discussion. And that's exactly what I did. I picked up the pen, a cheap plastic stick from a bank probably 2 decades old. The ink was thick and slightly smudged. I signed my name under every yellow tab. I didn't read a single word. The final signature smeared slightly, a fitting symbol for the entire filthy transaction. Garrett actually smiled when I pushed the papers back. It was the smile of a man who just purchased a $100 bill for a single dollar. Wensley clapped me on the shoulder. "Good man, Jake. This way everyone wins. You get liquid capital. We continue Dad's legacy. Clean and simple." I stood up, desperate to leave. I was already at the door when Garrett called after me. "Almost forgot." He vanished into the back and returned carrying a dust-covered cardboard photocopy paper box. He dropped it into my arms with a heavy thud. "Dad's journals. He wrote in these things every night for 30 years. Documented every ounce of gold, every breakdown, every thought. Figured you might want them, since you're the sentimental type." He grinned. Wensley chuckled. "Maybe you can read about exactly how many rusted bolts you officially own now." They shared a hearty laugh, the kind men share when they believe they've pulled off the perfect deception. I took the box without a word. It was heavier than expected. As I loaded it into the passenger seat of my rental, I could hear their voices, muffled but clear through the thin walls. More laughter, the pop and hiss of beer cans opening. They were celebrating their victory. I sat there, staring at the box. My father had been a quiet man, gruff, practical, showing love through labor, not words. The idea that he'd written something every day for 30 years felt surreal. What could possibly be in those pages? The 6-hour flight back to Palo Alto was a blur. I placed the box on my clean kitchen counter. The dust from my father's house felt like a stain on my life. My brother's laughter echoed in my mind, the sound of their victory. I had to know what they thought was so worthless. I ripped the brittle tape off the box. Inside, nestled among dozens of worn, water-stained journals, were rocks. Not just any rocks. Each was a mineral specimen, carefully labeled in Dad's heavy, all-caps handwriting with a precise date and location. My hand bypassed a journal and closed around a heavy, bluish-gray stone labeled Whispering Gulch, July 22nd. It was unnaturally dense and cold. The weight felt wrong for its size. I pulled out the nearest spiral notebook and scanned the pages until I found the corresponding date, July 22nd. Crusher jammed again. This damn blue devil rock, hard as sin and heavy as lead. Not a speck of gold in it. Dumped 3 more cartloads in the ravine. I froze. My analytical mind, dormant from grief, snapped awake. Hard as sin, heavy as lead. These were not a gold miner's simple complaints. They were the precise descriptions of physical properties. And in that instant, the crushing weight of my humiliation did not just shift, it ignited into something sharp and focused, something dangerously like a plan. 2. The code. That first night, I didn't sleep. My mind was reeling with the journal entry about the blue devil rock. By morning, I almost convinced myself I was irrational. But I'm a data guy, and data guys don't ignore anomalies. I immediately hired an independent environmental consulting firm in Seattle. I sent them the property documents, the maps, everything. I told them I was considering selling the junk lot and needed a preliminary assessment. Their report arrived 3 days later. I opened the PDF expecting a boring, bureaucratic document about minor cleanup. What I got was a gut punch. The property is classified as brownfield industrial land. There are significant risks of soil and groundwater contamination, which represent legal liability for the owner. Estimated remediation costs would likely exceed the market value of the land by a factor of 3 to 1. Remediation costs would exceed market value by 3 to 1. My brothers hadn't just played me. They had shackled me with an environmental time bomb, a liability that could follow me for decades. But that's when the snap occurred. It was quiet, fundamental. I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started getting curious. I'd spent years finding value in data other people dismissed as noise. My father's junkyard was one massive anomaly. I pulled out all the journals. I spread 30 years of daily entries across my living room floor in chronological order. I wasn't looking for gold. I was looking for the man, trying to understand what he had been thinking, what he had seen. The early journals were standard: weather, equipment, maintenance, gold yields. May 3rd, clear skies, sluice running smooth. 4.2 ounces today. Need to order new pump seals. But around year 7, a new phrase began appearing. First infrequently, then with growing regularity. Blue Devil Rock. September 4th. Damn, Blue Devil is back. Heavy as lead, but won't break clean. Gums up the whole operation. Hauled 5 cartloads to Whispering Gulch. I grabbed a highlighter. By 2 a.m., my floor looked like a crime scene board, and a pattern was emerging that made my pulse quicken. The Blue Devil only appeared in entries about the northern section of the claim, never the main vein where Garrett and Wesley were working. And my father's frustration was comically consistent. December 1st. Tried to melt down a chunk of Blue Devil. Torch barely touched it. Whatever this stuff is, it's not normal rock. Still no gold. Waste of a day. I sat back, highlighter in hand, and the click happened. My father filtered the world through a single lens: gold. Everything else was noise to be eliminated. But the noise he was cursing and throwing away had specific, valuable properties: extreme density, exceptional hardness, high melting point, always found in the same location. I pulled out my laptop and searched. Heavy, dense rocks, blue-gray minerals, high hardness, resistant to heat, found in Alaska. The results made my hands tremble. Rare earth elements, strategic minerals, the kind of stuff essential for smartphones, electric car batteries, and advanced military equipment. The kind of minerals that, until recently, came almost exclusively from Asia. And the kind of rock that looks like worthless, blue-gray gravel to an untrained eye. I opened a journal from year 23. July 8th. North section still producing this blue junk. Why does it only show up here? Main vein stays clean and profitable. North just eats equipment and time. He'd almost abandoned it entirely. Instead, he kept working, kept getting frustrated, kept methodically hauling every ounce of Blue Devil to the ravine. He'd accidentally created the most detailed geological survey imaginable. Every date-stamped journal entry was a data point. Every complaint about hauling Blue Devil to Whispering Gulch was a coordinate. My father had been writing the answer in his journals every single night, and nobody knew to ask the question. I didn't sleep for another 2 nights. I scanned all 30 years of journals. Then, I wrote a script, a text analysis algorithm that could parse the handwritten text, identify keywords, Blue Devil, North Ravine, hauled, heavy, hard, extract dates, and map locations. My laptop fan roared, processing decades of data. Slowly, a map began to form on my screen. Each mention of Blue Devil became a point of light. Each complaint about hauling it became a coordinate. The cluster was dense, concentrated, the kind of distribution geologists dream about. This was a vein, a massive one. I cross-referenced it with the property lines from the inheritance documents, the ones I'd signed without reading, and I started laughing, alone, at 3 a.m. The property line that divided the main gold claim from the junk lot ran precisely along a major fault line. Garrett and Wesley had taken the rapidly depleting gold operation. I had received a major liability, an environmental cleanup nightmare, and apparently one of the largest undiscovered rare earth mineral deposits in North America. My father had spent 30 years cursing these rocks, never knowing. My brothers had spent one afternoon smirking at me, convinced they had pulled off the con of the century. Neither of them knew. Just me. And the map, glowing like a treasure chart written in frustration. I backed up the entire analysis to 4 different cloud services. I was staring at 30 years of meticulous, accidental data collection, a geological survey more thorough than anything a corporation could have commissioned. The crushing weight of humiliation was gone, replaced by something harder and purposeful. My brothers thought they had handed me garbage. They had done the exact opposite. 3. The leverage. The sun was rising over Palo Alto, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. My next call was not to a lawyer or to my brothers. It was to a specialized geological consulting firm in Anchorage. I couldn't risk showing personal interest. The cover story was simple. I was a potential buyer for an adjacent property and needed a preliminary environmental survey, including soil composition analysis of the surrounding area. Routine, boring, and totally invisible. They took core samples from 6 different locations across Whispering Gulch. The invoice was enormous, but this was the price of certainty. I shipped the samples not to a local lab but to a specialized facility in Frankfurt, Germany that handles REE analysis for major mining corporations. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. The executive summary was crystal clear. The samples contained significant concentrations of neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, and several other rare earth elements. The grade and purity were exceptional. Preliminary estimates suggested this could be one of the richest rare earth deposits in North America. I read that line 4 times. But treasure underground and treasure out of the ground are 2 different things. I needed capital, the kind of money that makes Silicon Valley seed funding look like pocket change. I flew to Houston, Texas. The private equity firm I met with, a group that financed oil fields and lithium mines, had mahogany furniture and maps of global supply chains on the walls. I didn't pitch a dream. I pitched a de-risked, pre-certified asset. I showed them my father's journals alongside the German lab results. I showed them satellite imagery. I showed them the inheritance documents proving clear title. Then I showed them the market data. China controlled over 90% of global REE production. Every electric vehicle battery, every wind turbine, every advanced defense system was vulnerable. What I was offering wasn't just profit, it was strategic independence. They funded me in 72 hours, $20 million for initial development with another $60 million on standby for full-scale operations. They didn't even try to negotiate. I incorporated immediately North Star Legacy Minerals. Legacy for my father, North Star because I was about to become the guiding light for every REE buyer in America. The equipment I brought to Alaska was not my grandfather's operation. I contracted a firm specializing in sustainable extraction, quiet electric excavators, robotic sorting systems. Phase 1 was not mining. It was the largest voluntary environmental cleanup Alaska had seen in a decade. We brought in hazmat-certified crews. Every piece of rusted equipment was cataloged, removed, and recycled. We exceeded environmental standards. My brothers watched the entire thing like a performance. Every afternoon, like clockwork, Garrett and Wesley would drive to the fence line dividing our properties, crack open beers, and watch my crews work. I could hear their laughter 100 yards away. "Look at this guy spending millions to clean up garbage we gave him for free. City boy doesn't get it. That's not how you make money up here." Their laughter carried on the cold air every night. I never corrected them. I just smiled and waved, which only made them laugh harder. The cleanup took 7 weeks. Then, on a Tuesday evening in late September, we lifted the last derelict truck bed out of the ground. The earth beneath it caught the late afternoon sun. The exposed soil wasn't dull brown or typical gray. It had a distinct, subtle bluish tint, unmistakable once you knew what you were looking for. My brothers were at their usual spot. They were too busy laughing to notice the color. They thought they were watching me polish rocks. I knew I was watching the wrapping come off a gift. That night, I authorized Phase 2, full extraction. The story broke simultaneously in the Wall Street Journal and Forbes on a Wednesday morning. I gave them everything: the journals, the lab results, the inheritance documents, the whole narrative. The headlines were immediate and brutal. Palo Alto Analyst mined billions from Brothers' junkyard joke. Brothers give away $5 billion deposit thinking it was landfill. The story went immediately viral. The comment sections were savage. Imagine being so greedy you accidentally forfeit a fortune. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. They showed up at my site office 3 days later. Garrett's face was the color of a stop sign. Wesley looked 10 years older. "This is fraud," Garrett yelled, his voice shaking. "You knew when you signed those papers. We'll sue you for everything." "We're family, Jake," Wesley pleaded. "We'll split it 60-40. That's more than fair." I let them talk. When they finally ran out of steam, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the copy of the inheritance agreement. "Here's your signature and here's mine," I said, sliding it across the desk. "You drew the property line, you made the offer. I accepted. Everything was legal. The deal is closed. Garrett crumpled the paper. You knew. Garrett crumpled the paper. You knew. I knew how to read data. I knew how to ask the right questions. You knew how to laugh at your little brother. We all knew what we knew. Now please leave my property. 3 months later, I got the call I'd been half expecting. An accident at the main claim. A catastrophic structural collapse in one of the primary tunnels. Years of deferred maintenance and aggressive extraction had weakened the system. The collapse ruptured a tailings pond, spreading toxic runoff into the groundwater. The EPA and the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation showed up within 48 hours. The fines were astronomical. The remediation requirements were worse, an estimated $35 to $55 million. My brothers were done. My legal team reached out with a final offer. North Star Legacy Minerals would purchase the main gold claim for $1. In exchange, we would assume all environmental liability and handle the cleanup. $1 for the mine they fought so hard to keep. They signed the papers in a lawyer's office in Anchorage. The following spring, North Star Legacy Minerals controlled the entire family claim. Last week, I flew back to Alaska. I stood on a ridge overlooking the valley. The old main claim was still scarred from the cleanup, but native grasses were returning. Whispering Gulch, my junkyard, was now a state-of-the-art extraction facility. Clean, efficient, and profitable beyond all projections. I brought one of my father's journals with me. Not the Blue Devil one, but an earlier one from his first year. I found the entry I was looking for. May 15th. Spent all day chasing glitter. The old-timers laugh at me. They say you don't get rich digging for what shines. You get rich when you find value in the tons of what everyone else throws over their shoulder. He'd known. Maybe not consciously, but somewhere deep down he understood the truth. Value is often hidden in the noise, in the complaints, in the things people curse and discard. He'd been telling me the secret the entire time. I just hadn't been listening. But I was listening now. I closed the journal and looked out over the valley. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and blue. He'd died thinking he'd spent 30 years moving rocks for modest returns, but he had left me a map written in frustration, a treasure chart drawn in complaints, a fortune built from everything he thought was worthless. And he taught me the most important lesson I ever learned. The real treasure isn't what you're digging for. Have you ever had to stand your ground against family pressure, especially when money was involved? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight are with the people who are supposed to love us most. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more real-life experiences about finding strength in difficult situations. Drop a like if you believe that the most valuable inheritance is not measured in dollars, but in lessons and freedom. Thank you for listening, and remember, family is about love and support, not control and manipulation. Share this story with someone who might need to hear that message today.